All right, so let's begin here. Let's see, where do we go? Where do we go? All right, so I'm gonna share my screen, T10, okay? And I want you to watch this as we step through, okay? So currently the discussion is happening here on this Miro board, all right? So the problem statement is correct. The type of tone deaf communication that we are having problems with is communication like this. Okay. So when you communicate like that, this is what the partner perceives. Okay. They perceive the message as blame and shame. Okay. Balinese men typically avoid written confrontation. So the message sounds like you're highlighting a mistake. The message is too long and it's in English, so does not process long English text very well. This is called cognitive overload. It makes people too stressed to try to decipher what you're saying. It's probably like if I have to read long passages of Bahasa Indonesia, right? I'd feel also very challenged, okay? Yes, English is stress. English is stress, and it's also uncomfortable because if you've noticed, most people who kind of are Balinese, they might not have gone through higher education. So speaking and thinking in English is counterintuitive. So that part also makes it English message means problems. All right. Anyways, wrong communication channel. Serious issues should come through phone, voice, in person, not a long message. Harmony over immediacy. Okay. So now this is pretty good. Okay. We're able to see inside Kutut's head and understand how his experience of our message is being played out. Okay. So the thing you want to do is you want to understand that this is not an engineering problem. Okay. The message is correct. The problem is, can you translate this message into a game, into a format that is low cognitive load, that is not English, but more symbolic, that is referring back to icons, symbols, um, brands that Mr. Katuta has seen before. So he recognizes the symbol, okay? And make it short and convey a simple emotional message that also expects a certain type of behavior to change, okay? So the way you should understand that is it's like a card, okay? You get the card, you see it, and without even reading it, you know what it means, right? So the message is in the actual the format. All right, so that's the goal. The goal is to translate this into something more digestible. These are some early prototypes, okay? So the progress we've made is a few, okay? We're working on two things. One is what is the correct format for the action cards? These are a gradient, and a gradient means we start here and we try to iterate, and try to refine the way the card design can look like, okay? Currently, our most recent iterations look like this, okay? Now, they have not been finalized yet, and the reason they're not finalized yet is we need to understand a bit of balance here at T10, okay? So this is generated through Gemini. And the good thing about Gemini is that it is quite beautiful if you know how to prompt it. The bad thing about Gemini is that it's very inconsistent, okay? So we don't know whether or not our prompts in Gemini will work successfully, okay? So when you're confronted with that design constraint, the smart way to do is to create templates. And so the discussion has been around, can we make 52 card templates, okay? So 52 card templates happens to be also the same as a deck of cards, all right? 4 suites, 13 rankings. And so the hypothesis is that we constrain our cards to 52, okay? We don't want 300. We don't need 3,000. because what happens over time is that you don't get quality anymore, you just get quantity. The idea of 52 cards is that we can imagine there's probably 52 situations, okay? That makes us try to reduce our vocabulary so that we don't keep on adding more new words that then we have to figure out how do we create like a actual message using too many cards, okay? And then we forget that we've already had cards that handle that purpose. So this idea of keeping it bounded by 52 cards is a strategic knowledge management decision. Okay, so no more, no less. 52 should be enough to convey most situations across. Okay, and what we do is that we identify the situation that calls for a certain card to be served. And we ask ourselves if that is the best card. If it's not, we redesign that card. Okay, so we don't just add more cards and add more cards because that ultimately becomes useless. Okay, so we need to kind of keep that in mind. All right, so we can now express the problem that Mr. Kutut has using probably something like this, right? We say that this is a policy conflict, this is the policy to get back, and here's a way out. Okay, this is a much more pleasurable design. Okay, and it's still too much English for sure. Okay, the text is probably too small for sure, but you can see that it now has a completely different emotional experience than before. Okay, so the question would be then, can this be deployed on an action feed on Ion, right, through Thea's behalf? And that's what we're trying to do. Okay, so that's part one, is the card design and the card messaging. Okay, so that's the hypothesis. Now, we're going to commit to doing this because two things. Number one, the mechanism in which BVGO has already been designed, the front end, the code facilitates a usage of this very easily. We don't have to create new anything. Okay, we can just simply modify the newsletter format to include something like this, and it's done, which is fantastic. Okay, we don't need to build in new buttons or anything, so that makes it a very efficient design. Now, the problem is this. The problem is, can we create a model that can read the card not according to how we see it, but according to how the user sees it? Okay, so then this becomes part two. This is part two, the persona modeling. So then the question starts becoming, can we actually build Pakatu? Can we build Mr. Jarvis? Can we build, Rako Susila? And the answer seems to be yes. The answer really seems to be yes, that within a culture, within an age group, within this context, you can get some pretty accurate feedback, even when you don't get any feedback from the real person, of how this model is perceiving your communication. Okay, so that's strong. So then the question starts becoming, what's the smallest amount of data? Because we don't want to add too much data that's complicated, right? We want to build it using the least amount of data that we can create a reasonable counter agent. We can present the counter agent, the message, in many different forms. We can say, how does this message sound? What would be your reaction? How does this message sound? What would be your reaction? Okay, so then we have a evolution on two sides. One side evolution is, how do we design a better message? The other evolution is, how do we create a more predictive model of that user? Okay, so this is a data question. This is how much data is enough. All right, so the way to create the smallest packet of data is to answer these questions to the best capability. Okay, what's the intended behavior you want to invoke, and what type of behaviors that can lead to churn? Okay, so this is all you really want to understand. You want to find, as a product researcher, what was the point where the lack of communication happened. You can probably see that there are some, let's say, reports of risk reports, and they're not being read by the user. Why? Okay, they're not being consumed, and then they come back and they blame us for something. Okay, why? So those are the behaviors that we are trying to stop. We're trying to stop this problem of churn, not at the point where they churned, at the point where the communication started breaking down. I have a few hypotheses, but you should have real facts and real answers, okay? So you should go and find out, right, what happened was that on this day, we sent 15 messages. They didn't read any of it. And then on this day, they blamed us. And then we sent a message saying we sent you a message. And that was where there was a loss of engagement, okay? So the key is to keep the engagement. And then the way to keep the engagement is to think about how can this be a game, okay? Now, so here's what we're building. We are now building a hypothesis, right? That you have 3 tiers of data. Actually, why don't we just call it first tier, second tier, third tier, okay? So the first tier is identity. Identity is who is this person, how old are they, where are they from, what's their background, where are they born, what's their job. That's identity. Second tier is what's in the contract, what conversations have we had. Actually, what's in their conversation is probably engagement. Sorry, that's probably in, okay, that's probably here, right? What's on the contract, what's on the HubSpot records, and then the third tier of data is engagement data. What have we spoken to them about? What's the BBGO engagement history? That's the thing, okay? Now, you might find that you don't need maybe as much information as all of this. Maybe 1 tier and 2 tier is enough, okay? But that's the idea. So then what you are doing is you're putting this into a object. You're creating, are you familiar, Tita, with object-oriented programming?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, good. So in object-oriented programming, we create an object and we instantiate it with variables, right? We say that it has these fixed variables, these. Okay, so it's kind of like the same idea, right? But you instantiate a person with variables, right? With data. So you create its initial data, right? It's fixed variables, and then you create the constants and the variables, right? The constants are like the identity, and then the variables are like the relationship as it progresses over time. Okay, so this allows you to build a usable model for who the counterparty is. Okay, so once you have that model, you can start playing around. Okay, you can start taking this and creating a model using maybe Notebook LM. Okay, or this is what I did. I created one model of Thea on this side, and I created another model of Pot Raka Susila on the other side. Okay, and I made messages back and forward. Okay, so it's kind of like a adversarial network. Okay, until I understood Pot Raka's mindset correctly. It was very clear, and I was able to come up with a new iteration of Thea that was able to address. Okay, so this is how we do it, right? This helps you develop strategic empathy. This allows you to see what's going on inside your user's mind, all right? So that you don't send out tone-deaf messages, or rather, you don't build an agent that then sends out tone-deaf messages, all right? There should be no reason now that Thea is tone-deaf, because Thea gets to play and experiment and simulate with the model. Now, the only reason I can imagine that in the future there's a problem, it's probably because your model wasn't any good. You did not accurately model the user using enough data, or you didn't capture the correct thing. So that turns relationship management into data management, okay? Which makes it far easier for people who are designing products, engineering to build, all right? This isn't an art anymore. This is a science now. This can be done using, once again, back to this point, what data do you need, and what's the least amount of data that you need, and what is your intention, okay? Once you have that, then you can fully simulate and develop a coherent message each time, right? And then you just take that message and you pass it through a image translator, okay? You just pass it through a designer, and the designer then kicks out the cards for you to serve, okay? So, so you take a message that's really complicated and you just send out 1, 2, 3 cards, done, okay? And then problem solve, okay? So that's the idea. That's our current progress right now, okay? Right now, what we are doing is what you should tell me, okay, is this. What we're doing is we need to find a solution to the design problem. We need to find a design that is capable of being reproduced reliably to convey the message that we want to convey. Okay, so that's important, right? So how much of it is template and how much of it will be generated will need to be it's a design versus engineering problem. Okay, so we need to say, all right, the part we can generate can be reliably generated like this, and the part that needs to be template can look like this. Okay, so we just need to find out what the boundaries are for what the template is, and then what is the part that we can instantiate and infer each time. Okay, and then the second part is how much or how do we create a data model around each user. Now, the dumb way is, of course, to make one of each user, okay? That we might have to do that. I don't know. Maybe we have to make 150 different models, okay? But at some point, somebody smart will go, these models are the same because these people think pretty much the same way. Okay, so then you can merge some of these models together and save yourself some time and save in complexity, okay? So the process is one of creating the counter agents. That's one thing we need to do. And second is creating the messaging, okay? Now I'll tell you one thing. So we probably will need to evolve from using these notebook LMs to something else because notebook LM cannot see pictures, okay? So we can't show the picture to notebook LM and see what it sees, all right? But we are still discovering the workflow. We need to figure out what the workflow is. All right, I've explained to you the components. I've explained to you also the big picture. Do you have any questions at this point to ask me? And I will know if you understood if you ask me good questions. If you ask no questions, I'll assume you didn't understand anything, okay?
For the partner model, is it just for specific user? I mean, specific partner or for
Excellent. I told Artie, and I'm going to tell you this too, okay? So the current problem that you're trying to solve is like this, okay? The client wants a cup. And so you go, okay, all right, I know how to make a cup. What do you need? I need something that holds water and is not too expensive. So you go like, all right, sir, here's a cup. Here's a cup. This is a cup. And the user goes, yeah, that's a T2 cup. Okay, this is kind of like a T2 level cup. It functions barely enough to hold water. Okay, but it's not really that great. So then you're like, well, why? Well, what's wrong with it? Well, you know, there's no handle on it. It's leaky, and you know, it just doesn't really work as a cup. Okay, so then you go, okay, great. So then you go and you listen to the client and you make them a handmade cup. Okay, you build a perfect handmade cup just that fits into their hand, and it's very beautiful. It's made out of clay, and it's unable to be reproduced. So now you've made something that's too custom but not useful. Okay, or it's useful but it's unable to be replicated. So the right way is not to do this. The right way is to design a cup that then can be mass produced using a machine that then is Thea. Okay, so Thea's job is to make cups that can be mass produced. All right, and the idea is that it will hold the message, it will contain the message, and it will deliver a great experience that will get the behavior that you want. All right, so if you've made cases that are too specific to each user, that's like making the cup that's custom made but not general enough. Okay, if you've made a cup that's too general but not useful and doesn't change behavior, then you've kind of made the mistake on the other side. Okay, so what we're going to need to do, Teton, is this: every good product starts with understanding what the user wants, okay? So we need to succeed first by probably handcrafting these, okay? We need to go and understand, well, before we got no engagement with this kind of messaging. This was completely useless, right? There was no engagement. But after we started using this, the engagement shot up 500%. Okay, good. We know we need to use symbolic cards with low amount of English, high amounts of symbols, and so that they understand. Okay, so that part starts becoming clear. And then we have to find a way to reproduce this each time. Okay, we have to find a way such that this can be reliably and stably generated each time without too much effort. Because if it's too much effort, then it's useless again, right? Because we don't have that. We're not using AI then. We're just using humans to do this. Okay, does that make sense now? Okay, so that's the goal. The goal is to, yes, at the very beginning, I think, Titan, we need to understand what is the right design. I don't know. You don't know. Nobody knows right now. Okay, the only way we'll know is if, let's say, the people who work in community management can stop churn without spending more time on phones, in meetings, calling people. Okay, and the only way we can get that to happen is if instead of having the partner think they need to talk to you, they just engage with these cards. Okay, they understand what the situation is, they understand what they need to do, and they participate. Okay, and then we reward them points and move their score up and down, their contract value, depending upon how they behave. Okay, so then that becomes a self-contained system, and we don't need to manage that over and over and over again. It manages itself. All right, so that's the goal, and it's totally possible because this is exactly what all real applications do. They are they drive the user experience through their own thing. Okay, all right. So that's the idea. Okay, make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good.
And then have we delivered the card?
No,
To
I don't think we've delivered any cards yet. No cards have been delivered as of yet. This is still a prototype. It's not even a prototype. It's just a discussion board. Okay. What Furkan has told me is that last week we were able to model this owner fairly well. This Mr. Raka Susila partner. Okay, so we were able to go on Notebook LM. We were able to rebuild Mr. Raka using his conversations and using his I don't know where it was, but okay. Where did it go? Yeah, if you find it, you're better than I am, right? But if we're here he is. Yeah, here he is. Okay, 12 sources. So we took his HubSpot conversations. I took websites about him, and we were able to put it together. Furkan did mention he thought it was a fairly accurate representation of this owner. Okay, so before he had to meet him, at least Furkan could once again have some idea of what the conversation would be like and simulate what he would say. Okay, this is great because you can fail as many times as you want with the model and then finally design something that's successful with this person. Okay, so it's much cheaper to fail with the model than it is with the actual conversation and then lead to churn. Okay, so that's the idea. It seems to work, but we have not taken the message and expressed it in card form. We're still doing it through meetings, okay? But the model is strong enough where it at least helps a competent manager deal with an owner that was difficult, okay? And explain it in a way such that the owner can seem to understand, all right? So that's version 1, proof of concept. Okay, enough, right? So we have a proof of concept. It seems to work. Now, the next thing we probably have to do is make some decisions, Titan. We have to make some decisions about whether or not to transfer consciousness, okay, to Notebook LM or to somewhere else, okay? Notebook LM is like a code editor, right? We can just write it in code back and forth, but it's not like a full simulator because it cannot see images and it cannot generate images, okay? So if we want to show Notebook LM these images, it's blind. It doesn't have a way of reading OCR, okay? So that's a limitation if we use Notebook LM. So we can create using maybe GPT Pro, okay, and put a GPT agent and instantiate it with data. That could be another way of creating a simulation, okay? So these are all different ways of creating the agent, all right? What you should be thinking of is, okay, these are going to be our prototypes. We're going to just practice using it as prototypes, and it's immediately useful. You see, I can immediately give this to Furkan, and it's immediately useful for him on that day. But what you should think about as a product designer is, how can we build these agents using no effort, okay? Using, like, we just put Raka Susila, and it will scrub our HubSpot, it will scrub the internet, it will grab everything, and it'll instantiate a accurate agent based on a checklist of data sources that this thing can do, right? That would be cool. An agent that builds agents, okay? An agent that builds the data profile of a simulated user, all right? So that would be great, because then we just go, I want to talk to this person, right? And then it just shows up in bigger. Okay, and then we could just test it out in bigger. That would be absolutely incredible, okay? So that would be more to the production level. The production level would be create an agent using the person's name and records, then test out different iterations until you find a message that the agent accepts and is okay with, okay? And then deliver that message through VVGo to the person, and then it succeeds. And then you know that you have created something that is magical, okay? You've created something that really worked. You can iterate thousands of times against a simulation and discover what it's looking for, right? And then bingo, you have a perfect piece of content that motivates them to move in a particular direction, okay? So that's basically the vision, okay? And I think it's achievable. I think it can be done. So that's a little bit further along. Right now, we're still in research, and so where we should be, Titan every day, talking to Furkan, saying, hey, look, how can I build you something so that you're prepared for a meeting? How can I build you someone so that you're prepared for a meeting? We build, and then that allows us to be very precise about the recipe for the data, okay? The recipe for the data should not be too much, because getting too much data is annoying, expensive, complicated, and also just it's a lot of work, right? So we just need just enough. We need a very elegant recipe, just enough, put together something so that we can test against these situations, okay? Now, there's a lot of data in the past where we failed, okay? Because we have a lot of churn partners. So now we can go and study that and test our ideas against those failure cases, right? So if I were you and I were thinking about how to deliver this project, I would think this way. I would think, how can I get a old partner who churned to stop churning if I was able to recreate them, okay? So I bring them back to life, okay? I look for the moments where the discontent started happening, and I go, all right, what if we had said this? What if we had said this? Like the dating, the 1 minute time machine, right? I showed you that video. Okay, it's like, what if you had said this? What if you had said this? You iterate, and then you will find what you should have said, and then you go, that's it. All right. Tell that to Furkan and say, hey, look, if we had said this to this person, do you think they would have changed their mind? And he goes, yep. Okay, that's what we say differently now. That's how we express ourselves in a different way. Okay, so that's pretty much it. That's basically the mindset. Okay, now I'm going to believe two things right now. Okay, number one, I believe all partners probably will find more pleasure engaging in a game with their own property than talking to us. Okay, I'm going to just choose that. That's probably more fun. It's more private. It's more, whatever. So if it's between playing a game with their property and having to have meetings, I think most people would say, just give me the game. I'll decide what to do. Okay. So then once we've done that, we've eliminated the need to have any more meetings, which is great. Okay. Now I know some people will probably still be traditional. They won't get it, whatever. So we'll probably just use the code editor version like this to talk to them. Okay. But we'll have a cheat sheet now that gives us an advantage in the meeting because we've already figured out what to say to them at the start, okay? But anyways, so there's two goals. One is persona modeling, okay? And the second is the design of the cards. Think of it as a front end, okay? And this is the back end. And that's it. Those are the two branches that we need to build, okay? Your job right now is to find out what your next job is, okay? And come and tell me what you think needs to be built, all right? So I would advise you don't build anything right now. I would advise you go ask Furkan, hey Furkan, are there any problem partners that you think that need to be modeled? And he'll be like, yeah, these three. And then you model them and you test them out and you say, what if we said this? What if we said this? What if we said this, right? And you show fluency in this workflow, okay? You show that you understand how to model, you understand how to design, okay? So right now, even if you're manually doing it, you still show that you understand the problem, okay? Most of this is a art culture problem, okay? It's mostly an art culture problem, and we're using strong engineering to deliver a message such that this person's mind is now aligned to where we want them to go, okay? So we tell them a message, and then their behavior goes to do what we want them to do, all right? Okay, so that's the bigger picture. Okay, make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Let's see. I'll stop there.